What longevity-related challenges do annuity and pensions providers face, and how well placed are providers to deal with this?
So it's clear that the aging is supposed to, or considered as a problem for annuity providers, and this is clearly the biggest challenge. I think that the solution is very clear. I mean, it's really the way that we designed the products in the past which created the problems. So whether the annuity providers are have the tools for solving the problem depends on how mature they are in respect to product development, in respect to thinking innovation of products. I think one of the key challenges in the society as a whole with respect to aging is that the retirement age did not increase to an appropriate extent. When you look across Europe, you saw the rise in the expected lifetime, but you have not seen an appropriate reaction from politicians and from the society in terms of a longer period of production. We simply have to adapt as a society and have a longer period of our life for production if we have a longer period for consumption, which is what we have when we grow older. So it's the real challenge lies in the product design, and the solution is just a cause for innovation and product development.
Thank you very much. Then my second question is, how long do you think it would be the norm to live until 100 years? And which are, in your opinion, the main risk drivers behind this?
Yeah, so prediction about aging for the future is, of course, difficult. I think that I believe, because it has to be a belief, I think that the current increasing expected lifetime will continue, but I think actually that it will slow down. Mainly because I think that the options which are provided by the biomedical industries, all the healthcare, what we can do by healthcare in respect to aging, could potentially lead to an increase in the expected lifetime similar to what we have seen recently in the last decades. But I think that at some point in time, very soon, I believe that economic growth will actually create problems. I mean, the development of healthcare options is extremely expensive, and we were only successful in that respect in the last decades because the politicians, they keep on pouring money into this to an extreme extent, and I think that we cannot afford it anymore. So this is locally, on a European scale, on a global scale, it's much more complicated because so many things, so many big questions are involved with respect to obesity issues in Asia, climate issues, mega trends that influence expected lifetimes worldwide. But locally, we will see a trend which goes up, but will slow down. My guess. I have to make a bold guess here. I say it takes another 100 years until we have a norm of 100 years.
Wow, thank you so much for your answer. Then the third question is, could you explain what is life insurance demand under health shock risk? Yeah,
so the demand of life insurance is something that I'm very interested in my research. I think it's key to understand why we provide the products that we do in order to meet the demand, and what typically comes out of stylized calculations. You get to understand what is the role of what you do. That the insurance products are supposed to make up for an economic loss of some type, and then you can make your calculations, and then you calculate sort of an optimal position in a life insurance or an annuity, and then you go to the real world, and you see that people tend to buy less, both life annuities and life insurance, than what you think they should do. And what is happening in this study is that we are trying to understand this, so to speak, life annuity puzzle. It's even also a life insurance puzzle, why people tend to buy less of these things. And our explanation is the following. In this paper, we study the impact from essentially frictions. So the fact that there is a stickiness in these products. I mean, if you have the product, you cannot get rid of it, maybe, even in cases where you get disabled or where you get ill. Maybe you cannot get rid. You get stuck in your life insurance or annuity positions, and sort of the point is that if you take that into account, that there's a risk of getting trapped into insurances that you don't want, then you tend to buy less of that. And that's really the issue here. People are afraid of getting stuck with life insurances, maybe other insurances also, but in this particular case, life insurances, that where the health development creates a situation where they don't need this life insurance anymore because they don't have an income to protect, or they cannot afford it anymore because they don't have any income. So the point is that if you that there are these frictions in the insurance market, which creates a lower demand for insurance and life insurance than what neoclassical optimization calculations predict.
Thank you. What did the insurance learn from the bankruptcies and economic crisis?
Yeah, so the depressing answer from my side is not much. I think I'm a little bit embarrassed that it appears to me that the banking industry is far ahead when it comes to understanding risk measures in solvency. So they went from value at risk based solvency calculation towards expected shortfall based solvency calculations, and whereas Solvency II in Europe, starting essentially 1st of January 2016, starts out with the value at risk based, and that's a little bit embarrassing. We should be the ones who are experts on risk, and then we don't know how to implement appropriate solvency requirements. On a broader scale, I would say that that's not my main worry. My main worry is actually more generally about solvency issues, that maybe the whole idea of risk-based solvency requirement, I'm not talking about which risk measure to use here, but just the whole idea about risk-based solvency requirements will decrease the systematic risk. But my main worry is actually that it will not decrease or maybe even increase the systemic risk. The difference is whether one particular insurance provider, whether he is exposed to risks that he cannot diversify away. Right? That's a systemic risk, and that can be sort of measured and part controls by modern risk-based solvency regimes. The whole problem is that the way that it's constructed at the moment is that if then one company fails, then the idea should be that the customer, the policyholder, can just go to another company on the other corner. But the whole problem is that if the one company failed, then also the other company has failed, so the other company on the other corner is also not there. So this is systemic risk, and I think that my main worry, and that goes for both banking and insurance, I think that this systemic risk is going up. I'm not sure I have the solution, because it's really a consequence of harmonization of rules and globalization of the financial system and things like that. It's very complicated, but that's my point of view.
Thank you so much. In respect of this context, how can we model the worst case scenarios, such as in the scenarios leading to the worst case or the largest value of future obligations?
I think that the key words in your question is scenario. Just to go back to the answer of the previous question, I think that scenarios is extremely important. I think if insurance did something right, then there is a trend. That's the trend at the moment away from internal models towards standard models. I think the standard models have a great future, or at least maybe I should say scenario-based calculations have a great future. Maybe these scenarios could be produced internally, but the value of scenarios is very high. Of course, underlying calculating the scenarios are then all the risk measure-based considerations, like do you want your scenarios to be produced by a value at risk approach or an expected shortfall approach or something third. But I think that scenarios are key. I think also that it's extremely important to understand that the risks that these scenarios are going to take into account is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to model. So I think that the key and also therefore we should not. This is also why I'm a little bit worried about the risk-based idea. I mean, if it's taken too serious, we tend to believe that we are doing something right in terms of the underlying distributions. But since the underlying distributions are so uncertain, I think that there's a risk of believing too much in the calculations that we do. I used to say that the biggest failure is not that we cannot calculate these things. The biggest failure is that we believe we can. So it's really the strong belief in internal models, which is my main worry. If we should accept that there are something which are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to model, should discuss scenarios. Authorities, industries, policyholders, typically represented by authorities, of course, should discuss which scenarios can we expect to fail, and these are the relevant scenarios to use. It's much more about communication between the interested parties than about details in the modeling of the distributions, in my mind.
Thank you very much. Now, next we have the sixth question. According to your opinion, what are the new long-term trends and risks beyond the traditional types of catastrophes, and how we can model them, if we can, of course?
Yeah, in continuation of the previous answer, it's complicated. I think that it depends on the perspectives or the horizon, both in terms of time and geography here. I think locally, like in Europe for a couple of decades, I think that the systemic risk that I just mentioned here is maybe my main worry. In the longer horizon and on a larger global scale, I think that the megatrends are the most interesting thing to consider. What are the consequences on a societal scale in respect to aging, in respect to lifestyle of, for instance, just I think some 5 to 10 years ago, there was a mega trend, a mega change, in the sense that until then, or from then on, more people die from eating too much than eating too little. Right? In historic time, we already have more diseases, more deaths, which were produced by eating too little, and now people tend to die because they eat too much. There's a whole trend about urbanization, so people move from rural areas to urban areas, and also some 5-10 years ago, for the first time in historic time, more than half of the population, or more than half of the world population, live in urban areas, including all the challenges that will cause in terms of pollution. I'm not talking particularly about Europe now. I'm talking about Asia. I'm talking about Africa. Africa will have an enormous rise in the population in the next 50 years, in the next 100 years, as the only place in the world. There will be a doubling, maybe a a quarter of population in 100 years. What will that do in the long term with respect to urbanization, food, the supply of food, migration? If the African and European politicians fail to match consumption demand with consumption supply geographically, will face huge migration challenges, and these are sort of the long-term trends. I think it's all about politics. I mean, so if I should answer the question, which is the main risk, it's political. It's political in the sense if the politicians do not understand these mega trends and react to them properly, then that will create huge changes in society. In the short run, for a European pension actuary, he does not necessarily have to care. But of course, it's interesting to try to match these long-term visions and foresights with and try to react to them on a daily basis with respect to what I mentioned before: product design. How can we cope with these things? How can we hedge these things hedge these the mega risks in terms of better product design?
Thank you very much. And here we go with the last question. What is the future of the pension actuary?
Yeah, so it's a mix of what I foresee and what I hope, and this of course also sort of winds up some of my answers to the other questions. I think that the actuaries, the pension actuaries, the life insurance actuaries, should move their focus away from solvency calculations and be more concerned with whether the products that they deliver are the ones that are demanded by the end user, and the end user is not the politician; it's a policyholder. So the key point is that I think that the actuaries should be much more involved in product development and product design that they were. They should make sure that the macro risks are integrated in the product design, such that, or sort of hedged by the product design, such that the solvency calculations are much easier to deal with. So they should relieve themselves from the burden of all these very, very complicated and solvency calculations require detailed distribution modeling, and look into the products, make sure that the products serve a purpose for the end user. They should be much more aware of the role in the society. We as actuaries, we are nothing but consumption smoothers. We smooth consumption over time. As pension actuaries, or we smooth consumption over life event risks. We should do that in an efficient way and in a fair way, and thinking about thinking in that direction. What can we do better is more important, and will take up the time for future generations of actuaries. That's my belief, and that's certainly also my hope. I'm not optimistic here. There's so much innovation to be done here, so many ideas, but of course we're still stuck with some old products, suboptimal products that we have to deal with. But more and more time and energy from the actuarial community will be put into thinking carefully and cleverly about the way our products work, and thinking that we are the ultimate purpose of our being here, our raison d'être, is that we are consumption smoothers. We're not producing, or we're not here to make money for the insurance company, or to solve some policymakers' problem here. We're here for the individual.